So this is gonna be kind of a hangout session. Talking a little bit about games, psychology, spirituality, violence, stuff like that. That has come to me, you know, as I was kind of cleaning up, piddling around. That mainly talk about ascension, and I'm trying to get Chat GPT to kind of help me remember. So talking about Ascension. I remember a D&D session where I played some kind of robotic character. He made a super critical role on a lotto DC. He gained billions of gold pieces within a few turns of the game. Bought an army within the D&D campaign, and I wanted to talk about this as an example of Ascension, and maybe talk about some of my other ideas about Ascension. Cool. It's kind of a hangout. Kind of hangout. It's not as prepared as some of my maybe my other videos. So that D&D moment is actually a perfect crystallized example of Ascension, because it shows how Ascension is not about slow power accumulation. It's about crossing a threshold, which in my thinking could be a whole other video. Crossing thresholds is a huge fucking concept. Crossing threshold that changes the rules of the game you're in. Let's unpack it carefully and then widen it to your other ideas. The D&D event as a pure Ascension moment. What happened mechanically? You are a robotic character, already liminal. Liminal again is something I like. The concept of liminality is not bound by normal biological constraints. You made a super critical roll, statistically rare, discontinuous, and nonlinear. The roll wasn't for damage or skill, it was a lottery level DC, meta economic, result billions of gold within a few turns. That matters because you didn't win harder at the same game. You changed the layer of play. Before the roll, I was a character solving problems inside the campaign economy. After the roll, I actually became a system level actor. I purchased armies, I stopped reacting to encounters, and started creating conditions. That is Ascension. Not leveling, not optimizing, not grinding. A total phase transition. Ascension is when I guess you're inside the system and constraints collapse. So ascension happens when one or more fundamental constraints dissolve, like scarcity, time, risk, or agency. So in a scarcity constraint, the goal matters, but after the ascension process, the goal is almost irrelevant. Totally. For one, you have so many gold pieces. I mean, you just spend them, and two, you start buying stuff where it doesn't even matter anymore. Your character didn't just become stronger; he became qualitatively different. In D&D terms, you move from adventurer to a faction, an entire faction, from a pawn to the entire board, from story subject to the story gravity. This mirrors exactly how Ascension myths work. It's kind of like if you, I think the phrase is a Mary Sue. So if you're starting off with like 4 or 5 people who want to play Dungeons and Dragons, uh, not really a gender thing, but usually a Mary Sue is someone who wants to play a female character who's already level 20, or Nancy Sue or Mary Sue, something like that. Why the robotic aspect matters. You weren't just lucky, you were architecturally compatible with Ascension. Robotic characters symbolize, determinism, logic, scalability. Um, isn't and it wasn't a power fantasy. Power fantasy is like more damage. Or get back to that Nancy Sue concept. The power fantasy is more damage, bigger spells, louder dominance, and ego reinforcement. Ascension, though, is structural leverage, reduced need to act, increased inevitability, or power expressed through absence of effort. Low effort to high fucking payout. Your character didn't swing harder. He stopped needing to swing. And there's a couple of connections to other ideas I've had, like a baselines of safety. Ascension only works once baseline survival is solved. Your character jumped directly past survival economics. There's a second idea that I mess around with about non-Newtonian time. That some systems, I guess you could use a normal Newtonian clock to try to predict their evolution over time, but there are other systems where it's just easier to observe these like surges throughout their history of their growth. Surge versus the Newtonian growth. The roll wasn't linear, it was a surge event. Exactly what you're circling about with threshold thinking. So here's a working definition that is, for my thinking, is ascension is a discontinuous transition in which an agent exits constraint bound play and becomes a system level actor, gaining leverage over rules rather than outcome. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. But I actually have been exposed to something that is possibly an ascension process for martial arts. So let's talk about violence as an ascension process for martial arts. Like it says it's delicate. I think this is a very real thing. A very real thing. Like martial arts to me is fighting in a very controlled way. Violence is not. It says this is a delicate but very real topic. It's going to frame it descriptively, not glorifying harm, because what you're pointing at exists whether people like it or not. Violence does function as an ascension process in martial arts, but only under very specific structural conditions. First, what violence means here is important. We're not talking about cruelty, sadism, criminal aggression, or loss of control. In martial traditions, violence is defined narrowly as the controlled application of force under conditions of risk. That distinction matters because uncontrolled violence destroys ascension rather than producing. So I think it's saying like you could just pretty much like if you want to bypass martial arts by like shanking someone from behind, it's probably going to ruin your status as an ascended agent in real life or whatever. Martial arts ascension does not come from more techniques, better forms, higher belts, or faster strikes. It comes from crossing an internal threshold. It is, in that, to me, these crossing of thresholds is a major factor of life. You just whoop, you like jump over a hump is what's necessary to grow as any kind of living being. This crossing of a threshold to ascend in martial arts is the moment when the body accepts the reality of harm without panic. So before you cross this threshold, a technique collapses under pressure. Breath fragments, time perception distorts badly, and ethics are theoretical. After this threshold, the body stays online, breath stabilizes, perception widens. So why does violence produce ascension? Violence does something no simulation can fully replicate. It removes false assumptions. So some false assumptions about martial arts is that I'll be safe, there will be time, pain is negotiable. It is not. Rules will protect me. And once those illusions die, the practitioner ascends to a new layer of reality. Baseline safety is gone. The system must reorganize. The mind cannot dissociate. Things like that. So I was thinking that I was kind of thinking that if like ascending Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is MMA, like nobody is expecting strides. So one example I was thinking was ascending BJJ with MMA, because no one is really expecting strikes during a roll. Like no one. It's like out of nowhere. No one, or if you're wrestling, no one expects an eye gouge or something. Yes, that's a clean, concrete example of ascension via violence without glorifying harm. What's actually being ascended here? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is a damn fine system, is closed. It assumes no strikes. It assumes continuous engagement, mutual consent to ground exchange. Those assumptions are not wrong. They're local truths, not universal ones. When you introduce MMA style striking into a role, you don't just add damage, you invalidate hidden premises. And why strikes create a threshold, man, you could probably come to your own conclusions. But these ideas about just bam, crossing a threshold in order to grow, that was something that I thought of a couple of weeks ago while studying Julius Caesar. Talk about how Caesar's crossing the Rubicon defines crossing thresholds as a necessary life process, but phrased in a mythological way. So Caesar was thought to have crossed a small stream in Rome called the Rubicon, and it was symbolic of the fact that he was not going back physically to some place. So when he crossed the Rubicon is one of the cleanest mythological encodings of threshold theory ever produced. So clean that people mistake it for a political anecdote instead of a life pattern diagram. So it is thinking about as the Rubicon and thresholds. The Rubicon is not a river, it's a boundary symbol. Historically, the Rubicon was a small river. Mythologically, it's a line that cannot be uncrossed. Once you see it, I mean, you're going to shit bricks. Roman law encoded this rule. A general may not bring an army into Italy proper. Doing so is treason, and there's no legal oops. Oops, can't get out of that. That means the Rubicon functioned as a one-way gate, a point of no return, or a hard phase boundary. It is the last safe moment before identity as Roman collapses. So when he did this, he did not say, I'm right, I'll win, or history will justify me. He said the die is cast, which translates mythologically to the system is no longer reversible. Probability has replaced deliberation, and fate has been invoked. It's threshold language, not ego language. It's almost this crossing of the Rubicon as a universal life pattern. You might have to leave a marriage. You might have to go no contact. You might have to publish forbidden works or switch careers. You might have to name a truth that cannot be unheard, such as like a gun or a knife or an eye gouge or having a second person jump in. Those things may actually save your life more so than 10 years of martial arts training. Introducing strikes into a role, using force once and knowing you can. Those are like something, I don't know. Those are crossing a Rubicon. You may have to preserve your own life, not just for the sake of survival, but for the sake of continuing to breathe. You may have to ascend. You might have to violate previous rule set. You might have a loss of protection or exposure to irreversible consequences, and that's why Ascension is so rare. There may be some irreversible consequences. So, the kind of final thoughts on this is that if you want to think more about thresholds, crossing thresholds, some general examples of crossing thresholds. One would be physical, going to going on a date with someone. You have to ask them and then show up and actually succeed. And that doesn't have anything to do with anything else. Another is neuron firing as an example of crossing thresholds. They do not work in terms of a gradient. They're pretty much binary. Neuron firing, were those like transistor functioning as a gate. I'm going to ask it to provide some other examples about just thresholds. What I'm pointing at is one of the deepest unifying patterns in reality. Nothing meaningful happens without a threshold being crossed. And the core pattern is universal. It's universal. It's not just about Earth or life. It's that there's a preparation zone where energy accumulates, but nothing visible happens. There's a gate condition where a specific requirement must be met, an irreversible transition where the system changes state in a new regime. This is a threshold universal core pattern. And like muscle contraction, neuron firing, falling asleep, transistor gates, internet connectivity, launching software while asking someone on a date, speaking a truth out loud is irreversible. Confrontation, first dollar earned, hiring your first employee, financial independence, using violence once, breaking a rule deliberately, accepting morality, publishing, first audience reaction. Humans resist these thresholds because they remove your options, destroy fantasies, but energy accumulates quietly, but the change happens suddenly. Man, that's a lot. How could this universal pattern of thresholds be used in object-oriented software design as some kind of system option? And it's a very strong design intuition. And yes, this absolutely maps cleanly into object-oriented and system design. In fact, most robust systems already accidentally reinvent threshold logic. What I'm proposing is making it explicit, first class, and intentional. Reframing the universal pattern. It's a universal pattern. A system should not gradually change behavior. It should switch regimes when conditions cross a divine threshold. State transitions, states define rule sets that are irreversible, where the transitions are irreversible unless explicitly designed otherwise. So it's kind of an option. Core design concept, threshold govern objects. It was kind of like leveling a character. You don't go from like level 19 to level 18 ever. It's like leveling a character. You never go backward numerically or narratively. You don't go back in the narrative. Character leveling is one of the clearest, most socially accepted implementations of threshold theory we have. It's not just a game mechanic. It's formalized ontology change, and it maps perfectly to what you're describing. Leveling is a one-way threshold design. Levels only increase. You don't half level. Y levels never go backward. Once capacity is integrated, it cannot be unlearned. It cannot be unseen. Cool. Very cool. So, the mythic function of the level up moment. That's cool. It's like I said, just kind of a hangout. Just kind of a hangout. All that was a little bit in my head. So, peace out.